Hi, my name is Dale Comstock. This is the third part of a three-part series on combat mindset. In the first video, I talked about Cooper's color code for readiness. Second series, I talked about the OODA loop, and in this particular series, I'm going to talk about autogenic conditioning. Some people refer to it as visualization. Other people actually call it muscle memory. The fact is, it's not the same thing as muscle memory. However, visualization is pretty much in line with the idea of autogenic conditioning. What I'm going to do is kind of break it down a little bit more to you as far as what does visualization mean and how do you use it in your day-to-day life, and not only your day-to-day life, but really your future life, and how does that come to play, and how can you use that mental tool to prepare you for not just today, but for future events, maybe future events way down the road. So again, it's a mental tool to help you prepare for anything that you're doing, whether it's studying for an exam at school, whether it's some type of a physical event, an athletic event, whether a combat event, whether it's developing some type of a business plan or strategy, you name it, it all falls under the idea of autogenic conditioning, which I will tell you is not an idea. It's actually I would say it's a pseudoscience because it's not easy to prove. However, many people have used it very effectively. A lot of people use autogenic conditioning and don't even know they're doing it. In fact, the East Germans used to use autogenic conditioning for their Olympic athletes. That was part of their training regimen to prepare them for their Olympic events, whatever it was that they were going to participate in. So let's talk about how autogenic conditioning applies to you in a survival situation. The reason I teach autogenic conditioning, it's a way to shortcut the learning process, the physical learning process, by visualizing and mentally seeing what you want to do, how it's done, and the end state. So before I go into that piece of it, let me just kind of talk a little bit about the psychological and the biological components to this. So let's talk about just the mindset first of all. It's been proven that if you, for example, if you think of whatever it is, you're basically activating certain neurons in the nervous system, especially in the brain. In fact, I'm going to use an example here, learning how to ride a bicycle, assuming that most people that are watching know how to ride a bicycle or even know how to swim or do something that requires repetitive motion. And really it's your physiology that's kind of keeping you from falling off the bicycle or from drowning, right? So when you're learning, I'll use the analogy of a bicycle. So when you start learning how to use a bicycle, for most people, most kids that learn it, they start off with training wheels, and they learn basically how to steer the bike. They learn how to pedal it. They know how to use the brakes. And then eventually, when you take this training wheels off, the kid has to learn how to keep his balance while at the same time steering the steering wheel or the handlebars and still pedaling, and learn how to brake and basically looking down the road, making sure he doesn't run into a pothole or hit the back of a car. And he's got to have this circle of awareness built in as well. So he's got a lot of things cognitively that he has to do at once. All right, so he can't do them all at once. So normally what happens is the kid gets on the bike. Usually somebody helps him keep his balance, teaches him how to pedal, teaches him how to steer, and then coaches him along. Eventually, and I'm a father and I've had to do this quite a few times now with my kid, is eventually you let go of the seat and you kind of let them go alone, and you're prepared to catch them before they tip over. And then this process, the child learns how to start keeping balance and keeping the bike upright and continue keeping it moving forward. And then eventually, when you get older, or not even when you're older, eventually with experience, you learn how to ride a bicycle. You chew gum, you talk to your friends on the bicycle next to you. You're doing everything but focusing on actually pedaling and steering and controlling the bike and keeping it upright. It's now all become this muscle memory thing, right? Now, how does that muscle memory thing come into play when earlier I mentioned it really has nothing, it's not really part of autogenic conditioning so much. Well, what happens is the brain sends electrical impulses all the way down to the muscle groups that it's recruiting to use for whatever the specified action is. In this case, let's just say, basically pumping the legs on the pedals to turn the sprocket to make the wheels turn to move forward. And also recruiting muscles are required to control the handlebars. So what happens is initially, these are all new muscles that are being recruited for this, and they have to be synchronized to work together to pedal and to control the steering wheel to keep the bike upright. So at first it's kind of a haphazard, a very sloppy event because you're not getting everything tuned properly. You're falling off the bike and you're all over the place as you're pedaling. But eventually it starts to smooth out, and you do it faster and faster and faster to the point where you can actually do it without thinking about it anymore, right? And same thing with anything else that you do in life that requires some type of repetitive motion. So, and why does that happen? Because as the brain sends these these electrical currents down the neural pathways via the spinal cord and then branching out into the body, you're getting this this transformation in your body is biology, physiology. Basically, what's happening is you're getting and the best way I can explain it to the layman is imagine walking through the woods for the first time. There's no trail, and you walk through the first day, you cut your own trail. Second day, you do it again. You keep walking the same trail over time, right? And just think about that trail as a neuron, right? A part of your nervous system, a nerve. Eventually, as you walk the same trail every day, you start to beat a path. It gets a little bit easier. You've already broken most of the branches to get through, so you can walk a little bit more efficiently. And with time, you've cleared it out enough where you can maybe ride a bike down it. And then if you do it long enough and you bring enough friends, i.e. more energy, the path gets wider, harder, more compacted, and you can actually start driving a vehicle down it. And before you know it, you've got a freeway, and that's and then you can travel much faster to your destination. And so that's kind of the same principle that we're talking about when we talk about the nervous system, right? Basically, it's called myelination. And through this myelination process, basically, if you can just think about it in that regard, the nerves actually getting bigger and bigger and allowing the electrical impulses to travel without as much inhibition until eventually they travel and they flow very quickly and almost instantly to the muscle groups. So we ended up recruiting certain muscle groups by stimulating certain nervous systems, parts of the nervous system, to send electrical impulses down through the muscles. So with all that in mind, now think about the mental piece of it. You're kind of doing the same thing in your mind. You're creating a network of nerves in your brain to store information, to cognitively think things through, come up with solutions, analyze things, and then basically remember, whether it's in your long-term or short-term memory, these solutions or these memories or these experiences to whatever it is that you're taking in visually. So with all that said, and I'm going to give you a couple of my own personal experiences, and hopefully you can kind of draw from my experience what I'm referring to. So this is kind of it's in one of my books that I wrote. It's actually another webinar that I wrote or created. But when I was a kid playing on a baseball team, I played left field sometimes, and I jokingly say sometimes I played left out, wasn't even that good. I ended up playing catcher one day. Our catcher got hurt, and for some reason my coach decided that he wanted me to play catcher. And the night before we had a big game is when he made this decision. So I'd never played catcher before. I was really kind of scared to death to play catcher because I just didn't have any confidence, and that's why I played in the left field and sometimes was left out. So anyways, I had about maybe 20, 30 minutes to practice catching the ball. The catcher's man, the guy swinging the bat. Everybody on the team was coaching me on what to do and how to do it. And I thought, man, this is nuts. Why am I playing catcher on this team? Why didn't I pick somebody else? Well, the truth was we really didn't have anybody else to play. I mean, we barely had enough guys to put out in the field. And for some reason, my coach figured logically that, or illogically, that I'm the one that's supposed to be the guy playing catcher. Well, anyways, I practiced for about 20, 30 minutes. I took in as much information as I could as far as catching the ball, and then and I went home that night. Now, there was a big game the next day, and I was really nervous about going out there and making a fool out of myself. So I went home, and I went to bed very early, and I actually put some music on my headphones, and I just laid there for about 4 or 5 hours till I fell asleep. And all I did was visualize, just think about playing catcher the next day, and I envisioned myself catching the ball, missing the ball, throwing my body in front of the ball, catching pop flies, making double plays. I saw myself doing all these positive things, basically to stop that ball from going past me, to catch that ball or control that ball, and be an effective catcher. So I did all that, and then the next day I went out and put all the equipment on, and I remember still some of the parents were complaining to my coach, like, why is he playing, why is he playing catcher, and he's terrible. Well, anyways, parents were pretty cruel back then, just as much as they are today. And so I make a really long story short. Everything I had visualized the night before actually started coming true. I actually missed a couple balls as the batter swung, but I made sure I caught it in my chest. I stopped the ball, picked it up, and I was still in control of the game. I made double plays on my own from the catcher's mound. I didn't make any errors the entire game. I was like a one-man baseball team by myself. In fact, when it was all over, I was given the game ball as the most valuable player for that game. First time in my whole life I ever played catcher. I went from left field, left out, to probably the worst baseball player on the team, maybe even the league, to now I'm the catcher and I'm a superhero. And the only thing I can attribute my success to was the night before I visualized it mentally. I saw myself doing all these things, and I can remember laying in bed. It was almost surreal to where I could actually feel myself catching the ball. I could feel the laces on the baseball. I could really feel and sense everything of that game as if I was really there, but it was in my mind's eye. And so the next day it bared out, and I became the MVP, and I played catcher from that point on. So that's just an example where, if you focus hard enough, you can actually improve or enhance your ability to do something dramatically. And 4 or 5 hours that night was a long time. Normally what I usually do is, if I have an event coming up, I remember like the Army physical fitness test, even if I wasn't in good shape and I kind of was not quite where I wanted to be, if I knew I had a physical fitness test the next day, what I would do is at night, before I went to sleep, I saw myself actually conducting the test. I saw myself doing, in my mind's eye, 115 push-ups, 115 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and I saw myself running 2 miles in under 12 minutes, right? I always saw myself, and I visualized myself actually doing the push-ups, actually doing the sit-ups, actually running it, and in my mind's eye, pacing myself, thinking about my breathing, and then picking up, then thinking about at what point will I pick up my speed, at one point will I kind of cruise a little bit and recover and then make my surge. Had it all mapped out in my head, and every time I've done it, I've gone out. I've never, ever not maxed the PT test in the Army, except for basic training when I first started out. But after that, I've always scored at least the maximum 300, and I even got scores on they have an extended scale, but it's neither here nor there. But my point is, my success was not because I'm some kind of Superman. I was in good shape, but what I did was I mentally put myself in great shape, and because my mental condition is great, my body followed. It was just a natural order of things. So, and this applies to whatever you're doing. If you're strategizing, you're training with weapons, you're learning how to drive, you're developing a defensive plan for your home, for example, with your family. You have this vision, and everybody has the same vision, and you go through it and you rehearse it, and then you what if it. Then there's some things you just can't rehearse, right? But you visualize it. Everybody visualizes it, and basically what you're doing is you're pre-programming your mind for a potential, a possibility that something might happen someday. I'll give you another good example, and then I kind of taper it off here, but. I used to, when I was in the military, we flew around in helicopters all the time. And I remember thinking to myself, flying in the back of a Black Hawk, I said, man, what am I going to do if this thing crashes, And I remember really thinking, well, there's really nothing you can do because I hang on for the ride. And I thought, well, maybe there is something I can do. And so what I started mentally rehearsing it was, okay, if for some reason the helicopter is going to crash, and I know it's going to crash, I'm going to get rid of either my helmet or my boonie cap. I'm going to get rid of my rifle. I'm going to get rid of my load-bearing equipment. I'm going to strip myself down so I'm at least slick, right? And then I'm going to reach up and grab there's a red cargo rings on the Black Hawk helicopters. I'm going to reach up and take hold of those and take a knee and hang on. And so my thought was, if the helicopter crashed and I happen to survive it, at least I wouldn't get burned up or be trapped inside, the wreckage because of my equipment or my rifle still slung to my body. I'm actually pretty slick, and hopefully I can wiggle my way out, or it's less weight I have to crawl out with or run out with on my back. And so I used to do this for years. Now, I always rehearsed it, never had to do it until one day I had to do it. Helicopter I was on in Panama. We lost the number one engine, catastrophic failure. We lost lift right away. Pilots had to cut the fuel because they knew we were going to crash really hard into the Darien jungle in Panama. And instinctively, the first thing I did was I looked at the crew chiefs and looked at the reaction, because I heard the alarms going off in the cockpit. And when I saw the crew chiefs get excited, turn around, spin around, they're telling everybody to sit down, I knew we were in trouble. And I did exactly what I'd always mentally rehearsed. My helmet, my hat came off, my rifle came off, my load-bearing equipment came off. I reached up, grabbed the cargo rings, took a knee, and hung on for dear life. And by that time, we had already made contact. And I remember waking up inside the helicopter with a broken back, and the thing was on fire. And luckily, I didn't have anything on me to slow my exit. In fact, I was the only guy that I knew of inside the helicopter. What I didn't realize was other guys had been thrown forward into the cockpit, and they were all unconscious. And the other guys were all had to squirt out the sides and the doors. And so I actually was able to crawl out of the helicopter and crawl some distance away from it and roll over and basically wait for medical to come in and help me. So, but the point of all that is I did all those things I mentally rehearsed under duress, and I did it without even thinking about it. And so rather than sitting there like a deer in the headlights, I gave myself something to do to improve my survivability. So this is just something to think about. Again, it's autogenic conditioning. A guy by Neil Koo came up with this a long time ago, and there's a lot of information out there. And I'm going to conduct a second video that's going to go into some great depth on this particular topic. If you're interested in it, you can link to it, and you can learn a lot more from my experiences as how I have used it, how I have used autogenic conditioning to really reach many of my goals in life, from being a successful Delta operator, to being an athlete, to professional athlete, to being a successful businessman. I've owned 3 companies, and I've used autogenic conditioning with all those things to help me go that extra mile that I probably would have never been able to go had I not had the right mental tools to help me be successful.